Some stories don't begin with storms or arguments. Sometimes, they begin with a single sentence. Soft, ordinary, but heavy enough to bend an old man's heart. Mine began with 6 words. Dad, I'm busy. Maybe later. I don't know why those words stayed with me the way they did. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the pause before she said them. Or maybe it was because I wasn't asking for much. Just 5 minutes. 5 simple minutes with my daughter. My Emily, the little girl who once ran to me with scraped knees and drawings made of crayons and dreams. I suppose time has a way of changing what we run toward, and what we run away from. That afternoon the house felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that seeps through the walls and settles into your bones. I looked at the phone long after the call ended, as if waiting for it to ring again, to tell me she had changed her mind, that she found a moment, that she remembered. But of course it didn't ring. Phones rarely ring for people my age unless it's a doctor, a pharmacy, or some automated voice telling me I've won a vacation I didn't enter. Funny, isn't it? When you're young, the world feels like it's reaching for you. When you're old, you feel like you're quietly stepping out of the frame while life keeps moving without you. I sat in my old recliner, the one with the worn armrest where my wife, God rest her soul, used to rest her hand on mine. It still has a faint indentation where her fingers curled. I trace it sometimes when the evening stretched too long. That day, I traced it more than usual. You'd think after all these years loneliness would feel familiar. But it still surprises me, like catching your reflection in a window and suddenly seeing the age around your eyes. I wasn't angry at Emily. No, just tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. A different kind. The tired that comes from being an afterthought. I remember when she used to sit with me for hours. We'd talk about everything and nothing. School projects. Her friends. The silly boy who sat behind her in math class and pulled her ponytail. The dream she had of becoming an artist, then a doctor, then a writer. Back then, she talked as if the world was a book waiting for her to turn the pages. These days her voice feels borrowed. Pressed between appointments, responsibilities, and the 1,000 small demands of adulthood. I understand. Truly I do. Life gets busy. Children grow. Parents age. Priorities shift. But understanding doesn't stop the ache. After the call ended, I shuffled to the kitchen to warm my tea. The cup had grown cold while I was waiting for her to pick up. I held the mug between my palms and felt the thin tremble in my hands. Another reminder that time is slowly working its way through me. I thought about calling her again. Just to say, never mind, sweetheart. Don't worry about it. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be a burden. That's the thing about growing old. You become careful about the spaces you take up, the interruptions you make, the minutes you ask for. 5 minutes. 5 little minutes. I kept hearing myself whisper it like a prayer. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the street. The neighbors' kids were playing in their yard. A little girl was laughing. One of those pure, ringing laughs that pull at old memories. For a moment, I saw Emily at that age again. Her hair tied in 2 short pigtails, her cheeks flushed with excitement as she begged me to push her higher on the swing. Higher, Daddy. Higher. Life was simple then. Love was simple then. Everything fit into the shape of a small hand reaching for mine. The sun was setting by the time I lowered the blinds. It cast long shadows across the room, touching the photos on the wall, each one a tiny doorway into a time I can't return to. There's one picture of Emily standing on my shoulders at the beach, both of us smiling as if time would never take anything from us. Every time I look at it, I wonder if she remembers that day as clearly as I do. Or if it's just another image buried beneath the busyness of her life. I sat back in my recliner and listened to the ticking clock. When you live alone, clocks become companions. They remind you that time is still moving even when your days feel the same. I tried to read, but the words swam on the page. I tried to watch television, but nothing held my attention. My mind kept circling back to those 6 words. I'm busy, Dad. Maybe later. I don't think our children realize how deeply those moments carve into us. How a small dismissal becomes a quiet wound. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. Not because I wanted to, but because memory is what fills the silence when no one else does. I remembered the night Emily was born. The way she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, as if claiming me as her whole world. I remembered teaching her how to ride a bicycle. Her frightened wobble, then the triumphant squeal when she finally found her balance. I remembered walking her down the aisle, my heart full and breaking at the same time. And now here I was, asking for 5 minutes. And feeling as though I had asked for the world. I opened my eyes and stared at the empty chair across from me, the chair Emily used to sit in when she visited. It looked untouched. Too neat. Too still. A chair should hold stories. That one only holds the memory of them. I wondered if I should tell her how I felt. Tell her that sometimes this house feels like it's shrinking around me. Tell her that the nights grow longer. Tell her that the silence feels heavier than any illness I've ever faced. But parents don't often say those things. We protect our children from our loneliness the same way we once protected them from monsters under the bed. We pretend we're fine. We smile. We say, "Take your time, sweetheart. I understand." Even when our hearts feel thin and tired. I placed my hand over the indentation on the armrest again. It felt warm, almost like my wife was still there, still listening. I whispered into the quiet room, "I miss you, Margaret. You always knew how to fill the silence." The house didn't answer back. Houses rarely do. But sometimes, they echo the things we don't say. I closed my eyes again and took a slow breath. I told myself not to cry. But tears don't ask for permission. They come when the heart can't hold its weight anymore. That night I made a decision. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. But out of love for myself. A love I had forgotten to practice. I decided that the next time Emily said she was busy, I would still tell her I loved her. But I would also find a way to fill my minutes with something other than waiting. Even if it hurt. Even if it felt like letting go. But that realization, that lesson, didn't come easily. It came later. After something much heavier settled into my life. Something that made me realize just how precious 5 minutes can be. The heaviness arrived slowly, the way most things do when you're not paying attention. It began with a little dizziness. A tremor in my right hand. A morning where the world seemed tilted just slightly out of place. I brushed it off at first, told myself it was low blood sugar or that I had stood up too fast, or that old age was just tapping me on the shoulder again. But deep down I knew. Our bodies whisper before they break. And mine had been whispering for a while. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays used to be the day Emily visited after work. She stopped doing that months ago, but my heart still kept track, as if clinging to an old routine would make it come alive again. That morning as I reached for the kettle, my hand slipped. The metal clattered against the sink, loud enough to startle me. I tried again, and missed the handle completely. A strange numbness crept up my arm, not painful, just unfamiliar, like my limb belonged to someone else. I sat down, breathing slowly, waiting for the feeling to pass. It didn't. For the first time in a long time. I felt afraid. Not of dying. No, death has become less frightening with age. Almost familiar, like a distant neighbor whose footsteps you hear every now and then. What scared me was the idea of needing someone, and having no one there. I reached for the phone. My thumb hovered over Emily's name. But I froze. I could hear her voice already, rushing, distracted. "Dad, I'm in the middle of something. Can it wait?" I didn't want to be another task on her list. I didn't want her sighing on the other end of the line, wondering why her aging father couldn't handle things himself. So I called the doctor instead. He told me to come in. His tone was firm, the kind of firmness you don't ignore. Getting to the clinic took longer than it should have. My legs felt heavy. My balance was off. Each step felt like walking on soft earth that shifted beneath me. At the clinic, everything smelled of disinfectant and quiet urgency. Nurses moved with practiced swiftness, murmuring into charts and screens. I felt out of place, like a fragile object someone had mistakenly left on a busy conveyor belt. The doctor examined me, his brows knitting together as he ran a small light across my eyes, tapped my knees, pressed along my wrists. Then he sighed. Doctors always sigh right before they say something you don't want to hear. "James, I'm concerned. Your symptoms may be early signs of a mild stroke." The word hung in the air like a weight. Stroke. A word that steals movement. Steals independence. Sometimes, steals memories. He recommended additional tests. Monitoring. Medication. Rest. Rest. That one made me laugh quietly. My whole life had become rest. Long afternoons in an empty house, evenings in a silent room, nights spent staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of appliances and the ache in my bones. As I sat there listening to the doctor's careful explanations, an unexpected feeling washed over me. I wanted my daughter. Just her voice. Just her presence. 5 minutes, even 2, would have been enough. But I didn't call her. I told myself she was busy. She had responsibilities. Deadlines. Her own life. But another part of me, smaller, older, more truthful, whispered that I didn't call because I was afraid of hearing those 6 words again. I took a cab home. The driver made small talk, but I barely heard him. My mind drifted back through the years, to a younger version of myself. A stronger version. A father who carried his little girl on his shoulders and promised her he would always be there. Funny, isn't it? How no one prepares you for the day when the roles reverse, and your child is the one who should be carrying you. When I got home, the house felt heavier than before. Like it knew something was wrong. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat in my recliner and closed my eyes, letting the dizziness ebb and flow. I thought about Emily again. Her childhood laughter. Her teenage frustrations. Her first heartbreak. Her college acceptance letter. Her wedding day when she held my hand and said, "Don't let go, Daddy." I remember her voice cracking. I remember mine cracking too. And yet now, I felt like the easiest thing in her life to let go of. Hours passed. The sun dipped low. I didn't turn the lights on. Darkness felt easier, less demanding. At around 8 p.m. my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Hey Dad, sorry I missed your call earlier. Everything okay?" I hadn't called her. The doctor's office must have popped up as a missed call on her phone. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered above the screen. I thought about telling her the truth about the numbness, the dizziness, the fear that had crept into my bones that day. But then I thought about her busy tone. Her rushed apologies. The way she always mentioned being swamped. So I typed back, "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just checking in. Love you." A lie, wrapped in love. She responded with a heart emoji. A small red shape on a cold screen. You can't hold an emoji. You can't hear its warmth. You can't lean on it when your world tilts sideways. But I looked at it for a long time anyway. That night, the numbness didn't return. But the fear stayed. Fear has a way of camping in the corners of your mind once it arrives. I realized something as I lay in bed. Loneliness isn't just the absence of people. It's the absence of being needed. Of being remembered. Of being someone's first call, not their afterthought. I turned onto my side and stared at the empty space where my wife used to sleep. I whispered into the darkness, "Margaret, I don't think she sees me anymore." The room stayed silent. But the weight of the words settled over me like a blanket I didn't ask for. And yet, even in that heaviness, something else began to bloom inside me. A small, fragile truth. If I kept waiting for Emily to make time for me, I would spend the rest of my life in a holding pattern. I needed more than that. I deserved more than that. But life has a way of testing your resolve, and mine would soon be tested in a way I never expected. The test came 3 days later. It was early morning, the kind of morning where the sky looks pale and tired, as if it woke up too soon. I was in the kitchen, opening the blinds, when my right leg buckled beneath me. Not a stumble. Not a misstep. A complete, sudden collapse, like the ground had been quietly taken away. I caught myself against the counter, breathing hard, waiting for strength to return. But the strength didn't come. My leg felt like warm clay, soft and unsteady, refusing to hold the weight it had carried for more than 8 decades. I stood there for a long moment, gripping the counter with both hands, trying to collect myself. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe the doctor was right. But even in that fear, my first instinct was not to call 911. It wasn't to call a neighbor. It wasn't even to sit down and rest. My first instinct was to reach for the phone and call Emily. I wanted her voice. I wanted her comfort. I wanted to hear her say, "I'm coming, Dad. Hold on." My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. I stared at her name glowing softly on the screen. For a few seconds, I let myself imagine it. Her rushing over, her arms around me, her familiar scent, the warmth of family in a house that had forgotten the sound of laughter. And then, like a cold wind, another thought flew in. What if she says she's busy? What if she sighs again? What if I turn a moment of fear into another moment of rejection? That possibility hurt more than the weakness in my leg. So I put the phone down. I leaned against the counter until the numbness eased, until my legs remembered their duty, until I could stand without feeling like the earth was tilting beneath me. It took nearly 20 minutes. I sat down in my recliner afterward, exhausted from doing almost nothing. Age has a way of turning the simplest movements into mountains. Mountains no one else can see. As I rested, I thought back to a different version of myself. Strong, confident, the man who lifted boxes, built fences, carried groceries in one trip, held his wife through storms, and carried his daughter on his shoulders through crowded fairs. Where did that man go? When did he slip away? And why does no one seem to miss him? My house felt too quiet again. Just the ticking clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, my own breath, slow and uneven. I closed my eyes and swallowed against the tightness in my chest, not physical but emotional. A heaviness that had been building brick by brick for months, maybe years. Eventually I reached for the phone again. Not to call Emily, but to call the doctor's office. They moved my tests earlier. I want you in as soon as possible, the nurse said. Her voice was gentle, more gentle than my daughter's had been in months. It's strange how kindness stands out when you've been living on scraps of it. I got dressed, taking my time, moving like a man twice my age. As I tied my shoes, I caught my reflection in the hall mirror. I didn't look like the father I used to be. I looked like a man fading at the edges, becoming softer, quieter, easier to overlook. And yet, somewhere inside I still felt like James Smith, a man who once mattered. The clinic was busier that day. Coughs, shuffling feet, wheelchairs, worried families leaning into one another. I watched them, absorbing their closeness, their warmth. It reminded me of what I no longer had. During the tests, a blur of needles, wires, cold metal, and quiet instructions, I kept thinking of Emily. Would she care if she knew? Would she rush over if she understood the truth? Or would I receive another message hours later? Sorry, Dad. Crazy day. Can we talk tomorrow? Tomorrow. There's a cruelty to that word when you're old. It assumes time is promised. It assumes life will wait. After the test, the doctor sat with me longer than usual. James, he said gently, this isn't something to manage alone. You need support at home, someone to check in on you. I nodded. He looked at me with kind, knowing eyes and asked, do you have family nearby? Family. Such a simple word. Such a complicated answer. Yes, I said. A daughter. Is she involved in your care? There was a long, quiet space between the question and my answer. Finally I said, she's busy? The doctor didn't judge. He didn't push. He just nodded as if he had heard those words from many aging parents before. He offered resources, home aides, community programs, numbers I could call. I took the pamphlets politely. But inside, I felt something shift. Not anger. Not despair. Something quieter. A realization I had been avoiding for too long. If I waited for Emily to show up, I might be waiting for the rest of my life. On the cab ride home, I watched the world pass by. Shops, children running, a couple holding hands, a man walking his dog with a gentle smile. Life was happening everywhere. Except in the places that belonged to me. When I stepped into my home again, the silence felt familiar but not comforting. Just present. Like a roommate who refused to move out. I sat in my recliner and held the pamphlets in my hands. They felt heavy. Not because of their weight, but because of what they represented. A new chapter. One I never imagined I'd start alone. I placed them gently on the table. And then, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Sorry, Dad, super busy today. I'll call you tonight. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Tonight. Maybe. She remembered. If life didn't pull her in 10 different directions again. For the first time, the words didn't sting the way they used to. Not because they didn't hurt. But because something inside me had finally begun to accept a painful, necessary truth. My daughter wasn't coming to save me from loneliness. I would have to save myself. That evening, I sat by the window watching the sky fold into dusk. The light faded the way memories do, slowly then all at once. The neighborhood quieted, one porch light at a time, until the world outside looked like a dim watercolor painting. Emily still hadn't called. I kept the phone beside me, though I told myself I wouldn't check it. Old habits cling tighter than we think. Every so often, my eyes drifted toward the screen. No missed calls. No messages. At some point, I whispered to myself, it's all right, James. She's busy. But the words felt thin, fragile, like tissue paper trying to hold back a flood. When the clock struck 10, I finally stood up. My legs wobbled slightly, reminding me of the morning's collapse. I steadied myself with a hand on the wall and moved slowly toward the kitchen, filling a glass of water as the refrigerator hummed in the background. Halfway through drinking it, something in me cracked open. Not loudly. Not with a dramatic gasp or sudden sob. It was a quiet breaking, like the sound of a thread snapping. I set the glass down and leaned forward, palms on the countertop, staring at the faint reflection of my tired face in the darkened window. I whispered into the empty room, I don't think she knows how much I need her. The silence echoed back. Silence always echoes when you're lonely. After a long moment, I straightened myself, breathing slowly through the ache in my chest. I walked to the living room and lowered myself into the recliner again. The indentation where Margaret once rested her hand seemed deeper tonight. Or maybe my yearning for her was heavier. How she would have handled this moment. She'd sit beside me, touch my arm and say, James, don't let sorrow hollow you out. We've survived too much to fall to loneliness. She always knew how to anchor me. Without her, I felt like a boat tied to nothing, drifting wherever the current wanted. It must have been close to midnight when the phone finally rang. Emily. Her name lit up the screen, bright and warm and painful all at once. I answered quickly, trying to sound awake, strong, normal. Hey, sweetheart. Her voice came rushed as always. Dad, I'm so sorry. Today was insane. I barely sat down. I didn't forget, I promise. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. Old instincts, I suppose. It's all right. I know how life gets. Are you okay? Your text sounded a little, I don't know, off. I closed my eyes. This was my chance. My moment to tell her. To say, I'm scared. I need you. Something is wrong. But the moment was delicate, and fear tangled with pride. I didn't want her sympathy. I wanted her presence. Her time. Her love, given freely, not out of obligation. So I did what many aging parents do. I protected her from the truth. I'm fine, I said softly. Just wanted to hear your voice. That's all. She sighed, a tired sigh, not unkind but distant. Dad, I wish I had more time. Really. I do. There it was again. That word. Time. We treat it like it's renewable, infinite, forgiving. Yet here I was, learning that time was slipping through my fingers faster than I could hold on to it. I know, I whispered. You sure everything's okay? Everything's all right, I repeated, though we both knew all right can mean many things. She talked a bit about work, about deadlines, about how exhausted she was. I listened, nodding even though she couldn't see me. I murmured encouragement, sympathy, fatherly comfort. And when she finally said, I should get some sleep, Dad, I told her, of course, sweetheart. Rest well. I love you. I love you too. Good night. The line clicked. The house grew quiet again. Only this time, the quiet felt heavier, like a truth settling onto my shoulders. I sat there long after the call ended, letting the silence soak into me. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. The world makes people busy. Life pushes them forward. Responsibilities pile up, and the people at the bottom of the list are often the ones who taught them how to write lists in the first place. Still, I remained in that chair, older, tired, and feeling forgotten in ways I never expected to feel. A few days passed. The symptoms came and went. Numbness, dizziness, a weak leg that wobbled when I stepped too quickly. I hid it all from Emily. I didn't want her to worry or worse, see me as a problem to solve. One afternoon, as I sat watching dust float through a shaft of sunlight, I heard a knock on the door. Soft, hesitant. Not Emily's knock. Hers was always hurried. I opened the door to find my neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, a kind widow who lived 2 houses down. She was holding a small container. I made stew, she said. Thought you might like some. Her kindness shook me. It felt foreign, unexpected. It reminded me how starved I was for simple human care. I thanked her and she smiled warmly. James, you look tired. Are you all right? Something inside me loosened, just a fraction. I lied, of course. Old men lie about their health the way young men lie about their feelings. But her concern stayed with me after she left. It planted a small seed in my mind. Maybe connection doesn't always come from the people we expect. Maybe at this age, love arrives from unexpected doors, unexpected voices. Still, that night as I sat alone once more, I couldn't shake a quiet truth. I missed my daughter. But I was beginning to miss myself even more, the man I used to be before loneliness became my shadow. And though I didn't know it yet, life was preparing to teach me something I had avoided learning for too long. That waiting for someone else to fill the empty spaces in your heart is how those spaces grow larger. The lesson arrived the following week, though I didn't recognize it as a lesson at first. It came the way most truths do, quietly, almost shyly, disguised as an ordinary moment. I was sitting on the back porch, wrapped in an old sweater that still faintly smelled of sawdust and autumn's long gone. The garden was overgrown. The roses Margaret used to tend had grown wild, stretching toward the sky as if searching for a pair of hands that no longer guided them. The air was cool, scented with damp soil and memories. I watched a small sparrow hopping along the railing, tilting its head in that curious way birds do. My breath fogged gently in the air. I could feel the weakness in my right hand again, just a subtle tremor, barely there. But it reminded me that time was no longer something I could ignore. I thought I should call Emily. Not to complain. Not to guilt her. Just to hear her voice, to remind myself she still existed on the other end of the line. But then my mind replayed her tone, distracted, rushed, distant, and the thought wilted. Instead, I looked at the sparrow and whispered, "Looks like it's just you and me today." And then, the memories began drifting in. The porch. Margaret laughing as she overwatered the tomatoes. Emily running barefoot in the yard, her giggles filling the air. Summer evenings when the three of us sat together, watching fireflies blink like tiny lanterns floating through the dusk. Those days were full. Rich. Alive. Now the porch felt like a museum of echoes. As I sat there, wrapped in warmth and loneliness, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. My vision blurred for a few seconds. I gripped the arm of the chair tightly until the world steadied. When the moment passed, I felt more exhausted than afraid. I whispered, "I'm getting worse." Saying it out loud made it real. Made the truth unmistakable. Inside the house, the phone remained silent, still, obedient, waiting. I knew Emily wouldn't call until evening if she remembered at all. So I lifted myself carefully and went back inside. The effort felt monumental, as if gravity had doubled overnight. I reheated some leftover stew, Mrs. Holloway's stew, and ate slowly, tasting more gratitude than flavor. Halfway through the meal, my eyes drifted to the old photo on the refrigerator of Emily standing on my shoulders. Her little hands were flung wide in joy. Her smile bigger than the ocean behind us. I wondered if she ever looked at that photo anymore. If she ever missed that version of us. A few hours passed. Dusk settled again. Day after day it felt like dusk arrived too quickly now, as if my hours were shrinking. And then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. The sound startled me. It had been weeks since anyone besides Mrs. Holloway had visited. I shuffled to the door carefully, steadying myself along the hallway wall. When I opened it, I froze. It was Emily. She stood there, a little breathless, her coat half unbuttoned, her hair pulled back the way she always did when she was frazzled. Her eyes searched my face, and something in them softened. "Dad?" she whispered. I just felt like I should come. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She stepped in, looking at the living room, at the small stack of pamphlets on the table, the ones about home care, fall risks, medical alerts. Her eyes paused there a bit too long. Then she turned back to me. "Dad, what's going on?" I opened my mouth to give her the same old answer. "I'm fine. It's nothing. Don't worry." But the words didn't come. Not this time. Something inside me, some worn, tired part of my heart, finally surrendered. I exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale you give when you've been holding everything in for far too long. "Emily," I said quietly, "I didn't want to bother you." Her lips parted. "Bother me? Dad, why would you think that?" I almost laughed, but the sound that came out was brittle. "Because every time I call you're busy. Every time I ask to talk you say later. And I know you don't mean it unkindly, but I felt like I'm asking for too much." A silence fell between us, a heavy, honest silence. Her eyes glistened just for a moment. "Dad, why didn't you tell me you weren't well?" My throat tightened. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want to be seen as a frail man losing pieces of himself. "I didn't want you to worry," I said. She stepped closer. "I want to worry," she said softly. "I'm your daughter. I'm supposed to worry." Her voice broke on the last word, the way it used to break when she scraped her knee or had her heart broken for the first time. And for the first time in a long time, I saw my little girl again. Not the busy woman rushing through life. Not the distracted voice on the phone. Just Emily. My Emily. She reached out and took my trembling hand gently in hers. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." My eyes burned. For what? For not seeing you. For not hearing you. For not being here when you needed me. Those were the words I'd waited months to hear, maybe years. And yet, the ache inside me didn't vanish. Relief doesn't erase loneliness. It only reminds you how long you've carried it. I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth I thought I had lost forever. "You're here now," I said softly. "That's what matters." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. We stood there quietly, holding on to each other in the doorway, two people who had drifted too far apart and were finally learning how to return. Later, when she helped me sit down, she saw the tremor in my right hand. "Dad," she whispered, "please tell me everything." And for the first time, I did. I told her about the dizziness, the numbness, the fall, the fear, the loneliness, the long days that felt like shadows, the 5 minutes I had asked for, the silence that followed. By the time I finished, she was crying openly. "I'm so sorry," she kept repeating. "I didn't know. I should have known." I reached up and touched her cheek gently. "Emily, we all get busy. We all forget things. Even the most important things. But I shouldn't have forgotten you." Her voice trembled. The guilt in her eyes felt heavier than my illness. I shook my head slowly. "This isn't about blame. It's about the time we still have. We can't waste it. She nodded through tears. I won't. I promise. I believed her. But promises don't undo the past. They simply build the path forward. As she rested her head gently on my shoulder that night, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet mending, fragile but real. Maybe she wouldn't always have time. Maybe life would still pull her in 1,000 directions. But for that moment, for the first time in what felt like ages, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt like a father again. For the first time in months, I slept without the weight of silence pressing against my chest. Emily stayed the night, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but because she wanted to. She made a small bed for herself on the couch, covered herself in the quilt Margaret had sewn years ago, and drifted off with her face softened in a way I had not seen since she was a child. I woke once in the early hours, the kind of half-waking that comes with age, and I saw her there, curled up, breathing softly. For a moment, a tender ache spread through me. Not the ache of loneliness. A different kind. A healing kind. The dawn came gently. Light seeped into the house, brushing the walls, warming the corners, making the place feel, if only for a moment, alive again. I shuffled into the kitchen, making coffee slowly, cautiously, as the weakness in my right hand reminded me not to rush. When Emily woke and walked in, rubbing her eyes, she looked almost like her younger self again. "Morning, Dad," she whispered. "Morning, sweetheart." She moved toward me quickly. "Sit. I'll handle it." I let her, partly out of necessity, partly out of a quiet yearning to allow someone to take care of me for a change. As she poured the coffee, I noticed the worry in her eyes. Concern makes a child look older. Love makes them look younger. Somehow she looked like both. We sat at the table together, and for a while neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't the hard, empty kind anymore. It was soft, full of presence, full of meaning. Eventually she said, "I didn't know how lonely you were, Dad." I looked down at my hands. "I didn't know how to tell you." She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "I missed you," she said. Those 3 words. Oh, how I had longed to hear them. But as much as they filled me, warmed me, something inside whispered a hard truth. I couldn't live waiting for these moments. I couldn't rely solely on her visits or apologies to mend the spaces inside me that time had hollowed out. Later that afternoon, she drove me to a follow-up appointment. She helped me into the car, steadying my arm the way I once steadied hers as she wobbled on a 2-wheeled bicycle. Life, it seems, always circles back. At the clinic, the doctor spoke honestly. "James, you likely experienced a transient ischemic attack, a warning sign. We need to monitor you closely. And you will need support at home." I watched Emily's face tighten, fear and guilt mingling in her expression. "I'll be there," she told him quickly. "We'll figure everything out." The doctor nodded gently, but after the appointment, as we were walking toward the car, I stopped and leaned against the railing. "Emily," I said softly, "I don't want you to abandon your life to take care of me." She turned to me sharply. "Dad." "No," I said, raising a hand. "Listen. I want your time, when you have it. I want your presence, when you're able. But I don't want your life to become smaller because mine is." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I just don't want you to feel alone." I smiled, a slow, tired smile. "Sweetheart, loneliness isn't cured by someone visiting once a week. It's cured by feeling connected, to people, to purpose, to the world." She blinked slowly, absorbing the words. "And I think," I continued, "that's something I need to rebuild for myself too." When we got home, she insisted on cooking dinner. As she chopped vegetables, I watched her move around the kitchen with a grace that reminded me of her mother. The sound of the knife against the cutting board was strangely comforting. The sound of life happening in a home that had forgotten how to sound alive. As we ate, I told her stories she had forgotten, or maybe never heard. Stories of her childhood laughter. Stories of Margaret's gentle wisdom. Stories of my own fears, failures, and regrets. And she listened. Truly listened. Not with half a mind, not with one foot out the door, but with her whole presence. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, she said without turning around, "Dad, I'm going to make more time. Not just promises, time." I stood slowly and hugged her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder the way I used to when she was small. "I would love that," I whispered. "But remember, your time is a gift, not an obligation." She placed her hand over mine. "I know," she said, "but I want to give it." When she left the next morning, she hugged me longer than usual. She kissed my forehead like she used to when she was little, reversing the roles without fully realizing it. "I'll come again soon," she promised. "I'll be here," I said. And I meant it, without expectation, without bitterness. After she drove away, the house fell quiet again. But this time, the quiet didn't feel like a void. It felt like a space I could fill. I walked to the back porch, slowly, carefully, and sat in the same chair where the sparrow had greeted me days earlier. The roses still grew wild. The air still smelled of damp earth. But something was different. I was different. I felt the loneliness still. Yes, aging doesn't erase that in a night. But now it wasn't an ache of abandonment. It was an ache of life, continuing. I decided, right there, that I would call the community center. Maybe join a senior club. Maybe attend a book group. Maybe find new voices to share time with. Because love from a child, it's precious. It's irreplaceable. But it isn't the only love that keeps us alive. And aging teaches us something quietly profound. We deserve connection from many places, not just the ones we're afraid to lose. As I sat there, sunlight warming my face, I felt Margaret's presence, not as sadness but as a soft encouragement. Almost as if she whispered, "James, it's never too late to choose life." I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. 5 minutes. That's all I had wanted. But life, in its strange way, had given me something else instead. 5 minutes that taught me how to move forward, even when the people you love are still learning how to meet you where you are. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need the reminder. At our age, our stories still matter. Our time still matters. And so do we.